I've been a cop for over a decade now, and I've seen some seriously messed up stuff. But nothing, and I mean nothing, could have prepared me for what I stumbled upon while investigating a dark web drug dealer. I'm not sharing this to glorify my actions or to get a pat on the back. I just need to get it out there because, quite frankly, I'm still trying to wrap my head around it all. It started like any other day. I was part of a special task force assigned to crack down on the rising drug trade, facilitated by the dark web. These weren't your run-of-the-mill street dealers. These were sophisticated operations run by people with money, power, and zero conscience. Our latest target was someone who went by the moniker Oblivion. He was notorious for selling a potent new drug that had already claimed a number of lives. We had a breakthrough when we managed to track a shipment to a warehouse in the industrial part of town. The place was decrepit, a relic of a bygone era when manufacturing was king. Now, it stood as a monument to decay and neglect. Perfect cover for illegal activities. My partner Dave and I were on point for the raid. We had a full SWAT team ready to back us up, but the element of surprise was crucial. We approached the warehouse under the cover of darkness, our steps muffled by the thick layer of grime and broken glass that littered the ground. The air was thick with the smell of mildew and something else, something metallic and sickly sweet. We breached the main door, weapons drawn, and swept through the first floor. It was eerily quiet, save for the distant hum of machinery. We found the source of the noise in the basement, where several people were huddled around a makeshift lab, mixing chemicals with disturbing precision. It was like a scene straight out of a horror movie, but the real horror was yet to come. We rounded up the suspects and secured the area. That's when I noticed a door at the far end of the basement. It was old, wooden, and out of place in the otherwise industrial setting. Something about it didn't sit right with me. I felt a cold shiver run down my spine as I approached it. The door creaked open to reveal a narrow, dimly lit staircase leading down into the darkness. Against my better judgment, I descended, flashlight in hand. The air grew colder and damper with each step, and the smell became more pronounced. It was a smell I knew all too well, the stench of death. At the bottom of the stairs, I found myself in a small, cramped room. The walls were lined with rusted metal shelves, and the floor was covered in a thick layer of grime. But what caught my eye were the photographs, hundreds of them, pinned to the walls in a chaotic mosaic of suffering. Each one depicted a different person, bound and gagged, their eyes wide with terror. In the center of the room was a large metal table. Strapped to it was a man, unconscious and covered in blood. His face was a mess of bruises and cuts, and his fingers were bent at unnatural angles. I checked for a pulse, and to my surprise, he was still alive. Barely. I called for backup, but before they could arrive, I noticed something even more disturbing. In the corner of the room was an old dusty computer. The screen was on, displaying a live chat room. The messages were pouring in, each one more depraved than the last. People were bidding on the chance to decide the fate of the man on the table. I've seen a lot in my years on the force, but this was different. This was pure, unadulterated evil. It wasn't just about drugs anymore. This was a window into the darkest corners of the human soul, and it made me sick to my core. We managed to rescue the man and shut down the operation, but the images and the messages from that chat room still haunt me. Every time I close my eyes, I see those terrified faces staring back at me, pleading for help that never came, and I can't shake the feeling that Oblivion is still out there, lurking in the shadows, waiting for his next victim. I've tried to move on, to bury myself in my work and forget what I saw, but it's always there, lurking in the back of my mind. And now, every time I go out on a call, I can't help but wonder what fresh hell awaits me. That's the thing about the dark web. It's a rabbit hole that leads to places you never wanted to go, and once you've seen what's down there, you can never truly come back. After that night, sleep became a rare commodity. Every creak of my house settling, every distant siren, sent me spiraling into memories of that room. But the worst were the faces from the photos. Every single one of them burned into my brain, their silent screams haunting me. A few days later, we got word that the man we rescued had regained consciousness. I went to see him in the hospital, hoping for some answers. His name was Rick. He was barely hanging on, his body covered in bandages, his eyes sunken and hollow. It was obvious he'd been through hell. "Rick, do you remember anything about the people who did this to you?" I asked gently. His eyes flickered with fear, and he shook his head slightly. I don't know. I was just looking for a job, he rasped. They said they had something for me. Easy money. Next thing I knew, I was in that room. They did things. Horrible things. For fun. He broke down, sobbing uncontrollably. I placed a hand on his shoulder, feeling a surge of anger and helplessness. We needed to catch Oblivion and his crew before more lives were destroyed. We combed through the evidence we'd collected from the warehouse, but nothing led us to Oblivion. Frustration grew, and I started spending more time online, trying to understand the dark web. My wife, Sarah, noticed the change in me. She kept asking what was wrong, but how could I explain it? How could I tell her that our world was a fragile illusion, that monsters lurked just a few clicks away? Late one night, after Sarah and the kids were asleep, I logged into a police-protected dark web server. I navigated through forums and chat rooms, looking for any mention of Oblivion. My hands shook with a mix of fear and anger. I knew I was stepping into dangerous territory, but I had to do something. After hours of searching, I found a thread discussing a new live auction. The post was filled with cryptic messages and dark humor, but one user stood out: Oblivion himself. He was teasing a big event, something that would blow minds and break souls. The date was set for the following week. I showed the post to Dave the next day. We decided to keep it under wraps until we had a solid plan. We couldn't risk tipping them off. We spent the next few days preparing, coordinating with cybercrime experts, and setting up a covert operation to intercept the auction. The night of the auction, I was a bundle of nerves. We gathered in a makeshift command center, a dingy room above a pawn shop. The atmosphere was tense, the air thick with anticipation. The tech team had managed to trace the IP address to a suburban house in a quiet neighborhood. It seemed too normal, too mundane for something so sinister. We moved in, a silent convoy of blacked-out SUVs. We parked a few blocks away and approached on foot, our breaths visible in the cold night air. The house was dark, no signs of life. We breached the front door and swept through the rooms, finding nothing but empty furniture and dust. Then, we heard it. A faint, rhythmic thumping coming from below. We found a hidden door leading to the basement, much like the one in the warehouse. My heart pounded as we descended, guns drawn, flashlights cutting through the darkness. The basement was a macabre reflection of the one I'd found before, only this time, it was live. A camera was set up in the center of the room, streaming to a laptop on a nearby table. In front of the camera was a young woman, bound and gagged, tears streaming down her face. Her eyes were wide with terror, just like the others. Oblivion stood beside her, a sick grin on his face. He was holding a long, serrated knife, playing to his audience. He didn't notice us at first, too engrossed in his twisted performance. When he finally did, it was too late. We moved in, subduing him before he could react. The room exploded in chaos, with our team securing the area and the techs shutting down the stream. We rescued the woman and arrested Oblivion. But the sense of victory was hollow. The laptop was filled with files, each one a different horror show. Videos, photos, chat logs, all evidence of a thriving market for human suffering. As we left the house, I felt a heavy weight settle in my chest. We had caught one monster, but the dark web was a hydra, with countless more waiting to take his place. The faces of the victims flashed in my mind, their silent pleas a constant reminder of the darkness we faced. That night, as I lay in bed next to Sarah, I wondered how much longer I could keep doing this. How much more horror could I endure before it broke me completely? Catching Oblivion should have felt like a victory, but it only opened up more questions. The evidence we gathered was extensive, but it was just the tip of the iceberg. The dark web is a tangled web of horrors, each strand leading to something more sinister than the last. My nights were sleepless, filled with nightmares and the constant hum of my own paranoia. I threw myself into the case, hoping to drown out the darkness with work. Our tech team combed through the files we seized, uncovering more victims, more auctions, more depravity. Every new discovery was a fresh wound, each one deeper and more infected than the last. One night, as I was sifting through the latest batch of decrypted files, I found a folder named Harvest. My heart sank as I opened it, revealing a series of videos labeled with dates and times. The first one was from a few months ago. I clicked play, bracing myself for whatever horror lay ahead. The video opened with a dimly lit room, much like the basements we had raided. The camera was fixed on a metal chair bolted to the floor. Strapped to the chair was a teenage boy, no older than 17. His eyes were wide with fear, his mouth gagged with a filthy rag. Oblivion entered the frame, wearing that same sick grin. He addressed the camera directly, speaking to his audience. "Welcome, dear viewers, to tonight's special event. This young man is our latest guest, and tonight you get to decide his fate." My stomach churned as the video continued. Oblivion listed off a series of increasingly horrific options, each one worse than the last. The chat messages popped up on the screen, viewers eagerly placing their bids. I had to stop the video, unable to watch anymore. The reality of what these people were capable of was overwhelming. We had to act fast. Each video in the folder was a ticking time bomb, a countdown to another atrocity. I called Dave and the team, and we spent the next few hours planning our next move. We needed to find these victims before it was too late. Using the timestamps and metadata from the videos, we managed to trace the location to an abandoned farmhouse on the outskirts of town. It was a perfect hideout, isolated and off the grid. We moved in quickly, hoping to catch them off guard. The farmhouse was even more decrepit than the warehouse, a rotting husk of a building surrounded by overgrown weeds and rusted machinery. The air was thick with decay, the smell of rotting wood and damp earth. We approached cautiously, our flashlights cutting through the darkness. Inside, the scene was eerily familiar. Another basement, another hidden room. But this time, there was something different. The walls were covered in strange symbols, crudely painted in what looked like blood. The symbols formed a pattern, a grotesque mural that seemed to pulse with malevolent energy. In the center of the room was another metal chair, empty this time. Chains hung from the ceiling, swaying gently in the draft. The air was heavy, oppressive, like something was watching us. I felt a cold sweat break out on my forehead as we searched the room, looking for any sign of the victims. Then, we heard it. A faint whimpering coming from behind a false wall. We pried it open to reveal a small hidden compartment. Inside were two young women, barely conscious, their bodies battered and bruised. We freed them and called for medical assistance, but it was clear they had been through unimaginable suffering. As we escorted them out of the farmhouse, one of the women grabbed my arm. Her eyes were wild with fear, her voice a raspy whisper. "He's not done," she said. "He'll never stop. You have to find the others." Her words haunted me as we returned to the station. Oblivion was in custody, but his reach extended far beyond his physical presence. The dark web was still active, the auction still ongoing, and there were more victims out there, waiting for rescue. We spent the next few days following every lead, chasing down every clue. Each new discovery was a fresh nightmare, a new layer of depravity. The symbols from the farmhouse kept appearing, each time more elaborate, more sinister. It was like we were being taunted, led deeper into the darkness. I became obsessed, barely eating or sleeping. Sarah tried to help, but there was nothing she could do. The darkness had consumed me, and there was no escaping it. Every day brought a new horror, a new reminder of the evil lurking just beneath the surface of our society. One night, as I was reviewing the latest footage, I received a message. It was from an anonymous user, a simple text that sent chills down my spine. "You're getting close. Be careful." The message was a warning, but also a challenge. I knew I was on the right track, but I also knew the danger was greater than ever. Oblivion might have been the face of the operation, but there were others out there, lurking in the shadows, ready to continue his work. As I stared at the screen, the symbols from the farmhouse seemed to dance before my eyes, forming patterns and shapes that I couldn't quite understand. It was as if the darkness was reaching out, trying to pull me in. I knew I couldn't stop. I had to keep going, had to find the others, had to put an end to this nightmare. But as I delved deeper into the abyss, I couldn't shake the feeling that the abyss was staring back, and it was hungry. I couldn't shake the feeling that the deeper I dug, the closer I got to something I couldn't understand, something ancient and malevolent. The symbols from the farmhouse were seared into my mind, and no amount of rationalizing could explain them away. They seemed to be part of a larger, more sinister plan, one that went beyond mere human cruelty. A few days after the warning message, I received another one. This time, it was a video link. The sender was anonymous, the message simple: "Watch this if you dare." Against my better judgment, I clicked the link. The video was grainy, the quality poor, but the content was clear. It was another basement, different from the ones we had raided. This one was larger, filled with strange machinery and dim, flickering lights. The camera panned slowly, revealing a figure tied to a chair in the center of the room. The person was barely recognizable, their face swollen and bruised, their body a canvas of cuts and burns. Then the camera moved to the wall, where the symbols were painted again, more elaborate this time. They seemed to pulse with an eerie, otherworldly glow. The air around them shimmered, like heat rising from asphalt on a hot day. The camera lingered on the symbols before cutting back to the figure in the chair. A voice, distorted and chilling, spoke from behind the camera. "You're too late, officer. The ritual has begun, and there's nothing you can do to stop it. The harvest is upon us." The video ended abruptly, leaving me in stunned silence. The ritual. The harvest. What the hell was going on? I knew I had to act fast. There was a bigger picture here, one that involved more than just drugs and human trafficking. It was something darker, more insidious. I gathered the team and showed them the video. We were all on edge, the weight of what we were dealing with sinking in. We had to find that basement, stop whatever was happening before it was too late. But how? The dark web was vast, and the clues were scarce. We pored over the footage, analyzing every frame, looking for any clue that might lead us to the location. It was Dave who finally spotted something. A reflection in one of the machines, showing a distinct logo of a local shipping company. It was a long shot, but it was all we had. We traced the logo to a warehouse on the outskirts of the city, near the docks. It was an area known for its shady dealings, a perfect place to hide something sinister. We moved in cautiously, our nerves on edge, every sound amplified in the still night. The warehouse was huge, a labyrinth of rusted metal and broken crates. We split into teams, searching every inch, looking for any sign of the basement from the video. The further we went, the more oppressive the atmosphere became. It was as if the building itself was alive, watching us, waiting. Then we found it, a trapdoor hidden under a pile of debris. It led to a narrow staircase, descending into the bowels of the earth. The air grew colder as we went down, the darkness swallowing our light. At the bottom, we found a door, identical to the one in the video. We breached the door, weapons ready, and stepped into the room. The sight that greeted us was worse than anything I could have imagined. The walls were covered in the same symbols, but they were moving, twisting and writhing like living things. The air was thick with a palpable sense of dread. In the center of the room was the same figure from the video, now lifeless, their body contorted in a grotesque final act of suffering. Around them, several people in dark robes stood chanting, their voices low and guttural. The symbols on the walls seemed to respond, glowing brighter with each word. We moved quickly, subduing the robed figures, but the chanting didn't stop. It was as if the room itself was alive, feeding off the dark energy. As we tried to secure the area, the lights flickered and died, plunging us into darkness. Panic set in as we fumbled for our flashlights. When the lights came back on, the room had changed. The walls were now covered in fresh blood, the symbols glowing an intense, sickly red. The robed figures were gone, vanished into thin air. I felt a cold hand grip my shoulder, and I turned to see one of the victims from the photographs, their eyes empty and lifeless. They whispered a single word, "Run." We didn't need any more prompting. We fled the room, the oppressive darkness closing in behind us. As we emerged into the night air, gasping for breath, I knew we were dealing with something far beyond our understanding. The harvest, the ritual, the symbols, it was all connected. A dark tapestry woven with threads of pure evil. We had stopped the immediate threat, but the darkness wasn't gone. It had simply retreated, waiting for its next opportunity. I knew then that this wasn't over. Not by a long shot. The aftermath of the raid on the warehouse left us all shaken. We had come face to face with something beyond human cruelty, something ancient and evil. The darkness we had encountered wasn't just a manifestation of human depravity. It was something much older and more malevolent. The robed figures had vanished, leaving us with more questions than answers. The victims were too traumatized to provide coherent statements, their minds shattered by whatever horrors they had endured. And the symbols, those damn symbols, haunted my every waking moment. I knew we had to dig deeper, but every lead seemed to dissolve into the shadows. Days turned into weeks, and the sense of dread only grew. I became obsessed, spending every waking hour poring over the evidence, trying to piece together the puzzle. The more I uncovered, the more I realized how deep the rabbit hole went. This wasn't just a local operation. It was part of a global network, a cult that spanned continents, all linked by the same dark rituals and symbols. One night, as I was sifting through the last batch of decrypted files, I found a journal. It was hidden in the metadata, buried under layers of encryption. The entries were written in a hurried, almost frantic script, detailing the thoughts and actions of someone deep within the cult. The writer spoke of the harvest and the ritual, mentioning a leader known only as the Master. The final entry sent chills down my spine. The Master has chosen the final location. The ritual will be completed on the night of the blood moon. The harvest will begin, and the Dark One will rise. We are ready. The blood moon was only a week away. We had to act fast. We traced the journal's IP address to an abandoned monastery on the outskirts of the city, a place shrouded in local legends and ghost stories. It made perfect sense, a location steeped in history and dark energy, a place where the veil between worlds was thin. We assembled a task force, prepared for the worst. As we approached the monastery, the air grew colder, the night unnaturally silent. The building loomed before us, a hulking mass of stone and shadow, its windows like empty eyes staring into our souls. We breached the entrance and moved inside, our flashlights cutting through the thick darkness. The interior was a maze of corridors and rooms, each one more decrepit than the last. The symbols were everywhere, etched into the walls, the floors, even the ceiling. It felt like the building itself was alive, pulsating with dark energy. We made our way to the main hall, where we found them. The robed figures stood in a circle, chanting in that same guttural language, their voices echoing off the stone walls. In the center of the circle was an altar, covered in blood, and surrounded by candles. On the altar lay a young woman, unconscious but still alive. As we moved in, the chanting grew louder, more frenzied. The robed figures didn't seem to notice us at first, their focus entirely on the ritual. We took our positions, ready to strike, but then the air grew heavy, the temperature plummeting. The candles flickered and went out, plunging the room into darkness. A low, rumbling noise filled the air, like a growl from the depths of the earth. I felt a pressure in my chest, a suffocating force that made it hard to breathe. Then, a figure emerged from the shadows, tall, gaunt, with eyes that burned like hot coals. The Master. He raised his hands, and the robed figures stopped chanting, turning to face us. Their eyes were empty, void of any humanity. The Master spoke, his voice a deep, resonant echo. You cannot stop the harvest. The Dark One will rise, and your world will be consumed. We moved in, guns drawn, but the Master merely laughed. With a flick of his wrist, the air around us seemed to crackle with dark energy. My team was thrown back, hitting the walls with bone-crushing force. I struggled to my feet, my vision blurred, my ears ringing. The Master approached, his eyes locked onto mine. You are too late, officer. The ritual is complete. I felt a cold hand on my shoulder and turned to see the young woman from the altar, her eyes wide with terror. Please, she whispered, stop him. Summoning the last of my strength, I raised my weapon and fired. The bullet struck the Master in the chest, and for a moment he staggered. But then he smiled, a horrific, twisted smile, and raised his hands again. The room exploded in light and sound, and I was thrown to the ground. When I came to, the room was empty. The robed figures, the Master, even the young woman, all gone. The symbols on the walls had faded, leaving only the cold, dark stone. My team lay scattered around the room, injured but alive. We had stopped the ritual, but the cost was high. The monastery was sealed off, the evidence buried deep. The official story was a gas leak, an explosion, anything to keep the truth hidden. But I knew the darkness wasn't gone. It was still out there, lurking, waiting for its next opportunity. I returned to my life, trying to find some semblance of normalcy, but the shadows never left. Every night, the symbols haunted my dreams, the Master's voice echoing in my mind. The dark web remained a constant reminder of the evil lurking just beneath the surface of our world. I continued my work, driven by the knowledge that the fight wasn't over. The harvest might have been stopped, but the darkness was always there, waiting. And I would be ready. Because in the end, the only thing standing between the light and the dark is us. And sometimes, the darkness is closer than we think. Hey everyone, this is going to be a long and disturbing story, so buckle up. I've been a police officer for over a decade now, and I've seen some pretty messed up things, but nothing could prepare me for what I uncovered on the dark web. I still can't shake the nightmares, and I need to get this off my chest. About a year ago, we got a call about a missing girl. She was 17, a straight-A student, and never got into trouble. Her parents were frantic, and the whole town was on edge. I was assigned to the case along with my partner, Jeff. We combed through her social media, talked to her friends, and searched every place she was known to hang out. Nothing. It was like she vanished into thin air. One night, while I was working late at the station, I decided to dig a little deeper. I'd heard about the dark web and how it was a breeding ground for all sorts of illegal activity. I'm not a tech genius, but I knew enough to navigate through it. I set up a Tor browser and started searching. It didn't take long before I stumbled upon a forum that made my skin crawl. The forum was called The Watchers. It was a disgusting place where people shared videos and photos of their prey. The members would boast about how they stalked and abducted their victims, providing detailed accounts of their heinous acts. As I scrolled through the posts, I felt a cold sweat break out on my forehead. This was beyond anything I'd ever seen. I spent hours reading through the sickening stories, trying to find any clue that could lead me to the missing girl. My stomach churned with each post, but I couldn't stop. Then, I found a thread that made my blood run cold. It was titled, "New Catch, Sweet 16." The user had posted photos of a young girl who looked eerily similar to the missing girl. My heart pounded as I clicked on the images. The photos showed her in various states of distress, tied up and gagged in what looked like a basement. I knew I had to act fast. I took screenshots of everything and immediately contacted Jeff. We needed to trace the IP address and find out who was behind this. Jeff was just as horrified as I was and agreed to meet me at the station. We worked through the night, using every resource we had to track down the monster behind the username. After what felt like an eternity, we managed to trace the IP to an address in a neighboring town. We got a warrant and assembled a team to raid the place. I couldn't shake the feeling of dread as we drove to the location. My mind was racing with thoughts of what we might find. When we arrived, the house looked unassuming. It was a typical suburban home, with a neatly trimmed lawn and a white picket fence. We approached cautiously, guns drawn, and burst through the door. The inside of the house was a stark contrast to its exterior. The stench of decay hit us immediately. The walls were covered in disturbing drawings and photos of various young girls, some of which were clearly taken without their knowledge. We moved through the house methodically, searching for the girl. In the basement, we found her. She was alive, but barely. She was chained to the wall, her body covered in bruises and cuts. The look of terror in her eyes will haunt me forever. We called for medical assistance and freed her from her restraints. She was so weak she could barely stand. I wrapped my jacket around her and tried to comfort her as best as I could. We also found the man responsible. He was hiding in a back room, surrounded by monitors displaying live feeds from hidden cameras. He was a middle-aged man, balding, with a sickening grin on his face. He didn't even try to resist as we cuffed him and took him into custody. I wanted to beat the living hell out of him right there, but I knew I had to keep my composure. Back at the station, the girl was reunited with her parents, and we began the long process of gathering evidence to ensure that this monster would never hurt anyone again. But the more we uncovered, the worse it got. He had been doing this for years, and there were countless other victims. Some were never found. I thought that would be the end of it, but it wasn't. The forum, The Watchers, was much larger than we initially thought. It was a network of predators, sharing their vile activities and supporting each other. Taking down one man wasn't enough. We needed to dismantle the entire operation. Over the next few months, we worked tirelessly, infiltrating the forum and gathering intel. It was mentally and emotionally draining. The things I saw and read haunted me. These people were beyond sick. They thrived on causing pain and suffering. I started having nightmares, waking up in a cold sweat, hearing the screams of the victims in my head. My wife noticed the change in me and tried to help, but I couldn't talk about it. How do you explain to someone the level of depravity you've witnessed? One night, while I was browsing the forum, I received a private message. It was from an anonymous user who claimed to know my real identity. They sent me photos of my house, my wife, and my kids. The message read, "We are watching you too. Stop now, or your family will pay the price." panic set in. I felt a wave of nausea wash over me. I knew I couldn't back down, but I also couldn't put my family in danger. I told my wife everything, and we sent our kids to stay with their grandparents. I installed security cameras around the house and started carrying my gun even when I was off duty. I knew I was in deep, but I couldn't stop now. I had to bring these monsters to justice, no matter the cost. After receiving that threatening message, I knew I had to be even more careful. I couldn't let these sickos scare me off, but the thought of my family being in danger kept me up at night. I was walking a tightrope, and one wrong step could mean disaster. We kept investigating the Watchers Forum, trying to find any lead that could help us take them down. Every night, I'd go home and dive into the dark web, wading through the filth and horror that these people reveled in. It felt like I was sinking into a swamp, and the more I struggled, the deeper I went. One night, I came across a new post that caught my eye. It was from a user named Silent Hunter, and it was titled My Collection. I clicked on it and felt my stomach turn. The post was a gallery of photos, each more disturbing than the last. The pictures showed young girls, bound and gagged, their eyes wide with terror. Some of them were bruised and bleeding. Others looked like they had been drugged. As I scrolled through the images, I noticed something horrifyingly familiar. One of the girls looked like a recent missing person from our town. My heart raced as I realized that this wasn't just a collection of random victims. These were all local girls, all recent disappearances. Silent Hunter was close, maybe even someone we knew. I showed Jeff the post, and we immediately started trying to track Silent Hunter down. We knew this could be the breakthrough we needed, but it was like chasing a ghost. The dark web provided a cloak of anonymity that was hard to pierce. We used every trick we knew, every connection we had, but Silent Hunter was always one step ahead. Then, one night, I received another private message. This time, it was a video. With shaking hands, I clicked play. The video started with a shaky, handheld camera moving through a dark, cluttered basement. The person behind the camera was breathing heavily, their footsteps echoing on the concrete floor. As the camera panned around, I saw the faces of the girls from the photos, each one looking more terrified than the last. The camera stopped on one girl who was chained to a wall. She was crying, her voice muffled by a gag. The person behind the camera moved closer, reaching out to touch her face. She flinched, trying to pull away, but she was too weak. The person laughed, a low, menacing sound that sent chills down my spine. Then, the camera turned, and I saw the person's face. It was blurred, but I could make out enough to know it was a man. He was wearing a mask, but his eyes were visible, cold and calculating. He spoke directly into the camera, his voice distorted but clear enough to understand. "You think you can stop me? You have no idea what you're up against. Stay out of my way, or you'll be next." I sat there, staring at the screen, feeling a mix of fear and rage. This bastard was taunting me, daring me to come after him. I knew I had to act, but I also knew I had to be smart about it. One wrong move and he could disappear for good, taking his victims with him. I took the video to Jeff, and we analyzed every frame, looking for any clue that could lead us to Silent Hunter. We noticed a few things. The basement had a distinct layout, and there were some visible landmarks in the background. We started cross-referencing these details with known locations in our area, trying to narrow down the possibilities. Days turned into weeks, and we were making slow progress. I was exhausted, barely sleeping, and when I did, the nightmares were relentless. My wife tried to be supportive, but I could see the strain it was putting on our marriage. She was terrified for our kids, and I couldn't blame her. I was too. One evening, I got another message. This time, it was an address. No message, no explanation, just an address. I didn't know if it was a trap or a lead, but I couldn't ignore it. I called Jeff, and we decided to check it out, carefully and discreetly. We arrived at the location, an old, abandoned warehouse on the outskirts of town. It was the kind of place where bad things happened, and the air was thick with dread. We entered cautiously, guns drawn, and started searching the place. The warehouse was dark and eerie, filled with rusted machinery and broken furniture. It felt like walking into a horror movie. As we moved deeper into the building, we heard faint cries for help. My heart raced as we followed the sound, praying we weren't too late. We found a hidden door leading to a basement. The cries were louder now, desperate and scared. We kicked the door open and rushed in. The sight that greeted us was straight out of a nightmare. There were girls, just like in the video, chained to the walls, their eyes filled with terror. They were malnourished, bruised, and covered in filth. We moved quickly, freeing them and calling for backup. As we worked, I kept my guard up, expecting Silent Hunter to appear at any moment, but he never did. We searched the entire warehouse, but there was no sign of him. He had vanished, leaving his victims behind. The girls were taken to the hospital, and we started piecing together their stories. They had been held captive for weeks, some even months, enduring unimaginable horrors. I thought it was over, but I was wrong. This was just the beginning. Silent Hunter was still out there, and he wasn't done. He had left us a message, a warning that he would strike again. And I knew, deep down, that he would. After rescuing those girls from the warehouse, I thought we had made progress. But Silent Hunter had other plans. He was still out there, watching, waiting, and it seemed like he was always a step ahead of us. The girls we rescued were traumatized, and it took days before they could even begin to tell us what had happened to them. Their stories were chilling. They had been abducted, drugged, and tortured for weeks. Silent Hunter had treated them like animals, using them for his sick pleasures, and then discarding them when he got bored. The investigation took a darker turn when we started finding bodies. Over the next few weeks, 3 more girls were found dead in various locations around town. Each one had been brutally murdered, their bodies left in grotesque poses, as if Silent Hunter was sending us a message. It was like a game to him, and we were the unwitting participants. One evening, as I was going over the latest crime scene photos, I got another private message. This one was different. It was a live stream link with a simple message: watch or they die. My heart pounded as I clicked the link, praying I wasn't too late. The stream opened to a dimly lit room with a single girl tied to a chair in the center. She was crying, her face bruised and bloodied. Silent Hunter stepped into view, his face obscured by the same mask he wore in the previous video. He spoke directly to the camera, his voice cold and devoid of emotion. "I warned you. You didn't listen. Now, you'll watch as I take another life." He pulled out a knife, and the girl's screams echoed through my speakers. I felt helpless, unable to do anything but watch as he tortured her. It was a sickening display of power, and I knew he was enjoying every second of it. I called Jeff, and we traced the IP address of the stream. It led us to an abandoned building on the edge of town. We assembled a team and headed out, hoping to get there in time. The drive felt like an eternity, every second ticking by like a death sentence. When we arrived, we moved quickly, searching the building for any sign of Silent Hunter or the girl. We found her in the basement, barely alive. Her body was covered in cuts and bruises, and she was slipping in and out of consciousness. We called for medical assistance and continued searching for Silent Hunter. But he had vanished again, leaving us with another traumatized victim and more questions than answers. The psychological toll was immense. I started having panic attacks, waking up in the middle of the night drenched in sweat. My wife tried to comfort me, but I was a wreck. I couldn't shake the images of those girls from my mind. The horror they endured was something I couldn't escape, and it was taking a toll on my sanity. Then, we caught a break. One of the girls we rescued from the warehouse started talking. She remembered a detail that seemed insignificant at first, a tattoo on Silent Hunter's wrist. It was a small symbol, something she couldn't quite describe, but it was enough to give us a lead. We started cross-referencing known offenders with tattoos matching her description, narrowing down our list of suspects. One name stood out: Victor Riley, a man with a history of violence and a penchant for targeting young women. He had been in and out of prison for various offenses, and his last known address was in a nearby town. We put him under surveillance, watching his every move, hoping he would slip up. Days turned into weeks, and our patience was wearing thin. Victor was careful, almost like he knew we were watching. But then, he made a mistake. He visited a storage unit late at night, a place he hadn't been to in months. We moved in, hoping to catch him in the act. What we found in that storage unit was beyond anything I could have imagined. It was filled with trophies from his victims, clothes, personal items, and photos. There were stacks of videotapes, each labeled with a different name. We took everything into evidence and arrested Victor, but he remained silent, refusing to speak without a lawyer. Back at the station, we started going through the tapes. Each one was a nightmare, documenting the torture and murder of countless girls. Victor had recorded everything, relishing in his depravity. It was undeniable evidence, but the horror of watching those tapes broke something inside me. I couldn't eat, couldn't sleep. I felt like I was losing my mind. Victor's trial was swift, and he was sentenced to life without parole. But even with him behind bars, I couldn't shake the feeling that it wasn't over. The nightmares persisted, and I started seeing Silent Hunter's face everywhere, in the shadows, in the faces of strangers. I knew he was still out there, and the thought of him hunting again kept me on edge. Then, one night, I received a final message. It was short, just a few words, but it was enough to send chills down my spine. You'll never find me. The hunt continues. After Victor Riley's arrest, I hoped the nightmare would end, but Silent Hunter's final message haunted me. You'll never find me. The hunt continues. I knew he was out there, watching, waiting for his next victim. The fear gnawed at me, and I couldn't shake the feeling that I was missing something crucial. We kept digging into Victor's life, hoping to find any connection to Silent Hunter. We discovered that Victor wasn't acting alone. He was part of a larger network of predators who shared their sick fantasies and crimes on the dark web. They called themselves the Brotherhood, and Silent Hunter was one of their leaders. This wasn't just about one man. It was an entire organization dedicated to stalking, abducting, and torturing innocent victims. I became obsessed with uncovering the truth. I barely slept, spending every waking moment combing through the dark web, searching for any clue that could lead us to Silent Hunter and his twisted accomplices. My wife was at her breaking point, and I could see the strain it was putting on our marriage, but I couldn't stop. I was in too deep. One night, while browsing the dark web, I stumbled upon a hidden forum that seemed to be connected to the Brotherhood. It was filled with encrypted messages and coded language, but one thread stood out. It was a discussion about an upcoming hunt, and the details were disturbingly specific. They were planning to abduct another girl, and the date and location were laid out in chilling detail. I immediately called Jeff, and we assembled a team to stake out the location. It was a small park on the outskirts of town, a seemingly innocent place where families went to relax. We hid in the shadows, watching and waiting, hoping to catch these monsters in the act. Hours passed, and just when I was starting to lose hope, we saw movement. A van pulled up, and two men got out, dragging a struggling girl with them. My heart raced as we moved in, guns drawn. We managed to apprehend the men and rescue the girl, but they refused to talk, remaining silent even as we hauled them off to the station. The girl was in shock, barely able to speak. She was young, maybe 15, and the fear in her eyes was a stark reminder of the evil we were up against. She managed to tell us that she had been watching her friends at the park when the men grabbed her. They had whispered about taking her to the Master, and I knew they meant Silent Hunter. The men we arrested were low-level members of the Brotherhood, expendable pawns in a much larger game. They wouldn't give up any information, but we found clues in their van maps, surveillance photos, and a list of names. It was clear they had been planning this for a while, and the scope of their operation was terrifying. One name on the list stood out: Emily Richards. She was a local girl who had gone missing a few months earlier. Her parents had been desperate for answers, and finding her name among the evidence gave us a renewed sense of urgency. We had to find her, and fast. We intensified our search, using every resource we had to track down Silent Hunter and his network. We hacked into their communications, intercepted messages, and slowly started to piece together their twisted hierarchy. It was a dangerous game, and we knew they were aware of our efforts. Then, things took a horrifying turn. One night, while I was at home, I heard a noise outside. I grabbed my gun and went to investigate, my heart pounding. As I stepped onto the porch, I saw a figure standing at the edge of the yard. It was too dark to make out their features, but I knew it wasn't a friendly visitor. I shouted a warning, but the figure just stood there, silent and menacing. I moved closer, and that's when I saw it. A small, lifelike doll hanging from a noose, swaying gently in the breeze. Attached to it was a note: "You're next." Panic set in. I rushed back inside, locking the doors and calling Jeff. I knew this was a direct threat from Silent Hunter, a chilling reminder that he was always watching. We increased security around my house, but the fear never left me. I felt like a prisoner in my own home, constantly looking over my shoulder. We continued our investigation, and the more we uncovered, the darker it got. The Brotherhood had connections everywhere, in law enforcement, politics, even in our own community. It was a web of corruption and depravity that seemed impossible to unravel. One night, we got a break. We managed to decrypt a message that led us to an abandoned warehouse on the outskirts of town. It was the same place we had rescued the girls from before, but this time, we were better prepared. We moved in, guns drawn, and what we found was beyond anything I could have imagined. The warehouse was a maze of rooms, each one more disturbing than the last. There were makeshift cells, torture devices, and walls covered in grotesque drawings. We found evidence of countless victims, each one meticulously documented in files and videos. In the deepest part of the warehouse, we found a room that was different from the others. It was meticulously clean, almost clinical, and in the center was a large metal table. On it lay Emily Richards. She was barely alive, her body covered in bruises and cuts. We freed her and called for medical assistance, but she was in bad shape. As we searched the room, we found something that made my blood run cold. A live feed, broadcasting to the dark web. Silent Hunter had been watching us the entire time, and as we looked into the camera, I knew he was still out there, laughing at our efforts. We took Emily to the hospital and continued our search for Silent Hunter, but he had vanished once again. The realization that we were dealing with a master manipulator, someone who could vanish without a trace, was terrifying. After rescuing Emily Richards and discovering the live feed, we knew we had to act fast. Silent Hunter was still out there, and the longer we waited, the more innocent lives were at risk. The evidence we found in the warehouse pointed to a larger network, but we needed to find the mastermind behind it all. Emily was in critical condition, but she managed to give us a crucial piece of information before slipping into a coma. She remembered a name, Dr. Graves. It was a chilling lead, but it was all we had. We started digging into local records, searching for any connection to this name. It didn't take long to find him. Dr. Jonathan Graves was a respected psychologist with a private practice in town. He had no criminal record, no history of violence, but something about him didn't sit right. We put him under surveillance, watching his every move, hoping he would lead us to Silent Hunter. Days turned into weeks, and we were starting to lose hope. Dr. Graves was careful, almost paranoid, but one night, we got lucky. He made a call from a payphone, something people rarely did anymore. We traced the call to a remote cabin in the woods, a place far from prying eyes. We assembled a team and moved in, determined to end this nightmare once and for all. The cabin was secluded, surrounded by dense forest. It was the perfect hideout for someone like Silent Hunter. As we approached, we saw movement inside. My heart raced as we prepared to breach the door. We burst in, guns drawn, and what we found was a scene straight out of a horror movie. The cabin was filled with surveillance equipment, walls covered in photos of victims, and a large map with pins marking various locations. In the center of the room stood Dr. Graves, his face twisted into a grotesque smile. He didn't resist as we cuffed him, but the look in his eyes was unsettling. It was like he was enjoying this, relishing in the chaos he had created. We searched the cabin, finding more evidence of his involvement with the Brotherhood, but we still hadn't found Silent Hunter. As we interrogated Dr. Graves, it became clear that he was more than just an accomplice. He was the puppet master, orchestrating the abductions and torture from the shadows. He spoke calmly, describing his twisted philosophy and how he believed he was purifying the world through pain and suffering. It was sickening. But then he dropped a bombshell. Silent Hunter wasn't a separate person. It was his alter ego, a manifestation of his darkest desires. He had created this persona to distance himself from his crimes, to justify the horrors he inflicted on his victims. The realization that we had been hunting the same man all along was both infuriating and terrifying. Dr. Graves agreed to take us to another hideout, a place where he claimed to have kept more victims. We had no choice but to follow his lead, hoping to save any remaining girls before it was too late. He led us deep into the woods to an old abandoned asylum. The place was decaying, a relic of a forgotten era. We entered cautiously, the air thick with the smell of mold and decay. The inside was a labyrinth of corridors and rooms, each one more unsettling than the last. As we moved deeper into the building, we heard faint cries for help. My heart raced as we followed the sound, praying we weren't too late. We found the girls in a hidden room, chained to the walls, their bodies covered in bruises and cuts. They were weak, but alive. We freed them and called for medical assistance, but the horror of what they had endured was clear. Dr. Graves had been using this place as his personal torture chamber, and the thought of it made my skin crawl. As we escorted the girls out, Dr. Graves made a final attempt to escape. He attacked one of the officers, grabbing a gun and firing wildly. In the chaos, I managed to tackle him, wresting the gun from his hand. The look in his eyes was pure madness, a glimpse into the true face of evil. I wanted to end him right there, but I knew I had to keep my composure. We took him back to the station, where he was charged with multiple counts of abduction, torture, and murder. The trial was a media circus, and the details that emerged were horrifying. Dr. Graves had been operating for years, using his position of trust to lure in his victims and satisfy his twisted desires. The Brotherhood crumbled under the weight of the evidence, and many of its members were arrested and brought to justice. But the scars remained. The nightmares persisted, and the fear of what could have been haunted me. My marriage was strained, my sanity hanging by a thread. The realization that evil could wear the mask of normalcy was a hard pill to swallow. As I sit here, writing this final part, I know the darkness will never truly leave me. The horrors I witnessed will always be a part of me, a reminder of the evil that lurks in the shadows. But I take solace in knowing that we saved lives, that we brought a monster to justice. Thank you for following my story. Stay vigilant and remember, the real monsters are often hiding in plain sight. Thank you for sticking with me until the end. The darkness may never truly go away, but knowing that we can fight it gives me some measure of peace.